Secretary Kendall, during Operation Desert Storm, the Air Force fielded 139 fighter squadrons spread out across the entire service. 49 of those squadrons belonged to the National Guard. And according to Air Force numbers, the total fighter fleet has been reduced now to 81 squadrons, with the Air Guard only fielding 26 of those. That means that over the past 30 years, we've seen nearly a 50% reduction in Air Guard fighter fleet. And this comes at a time when global tensions are at their highest in 50 years, and as we just heard from your answers to the previous Senator, the complexity is significant. We have a hot war in Eastern Europe. We have a looming threat of conflict in the Pacific. So bottom line, I'm concerned about the fact that we have a declining fighter plane fleet, and with the time when we need every single plane that we can possibly get our hands on, we have let our fighter fleet shrink significantly and are now continuing to reduce the number of fighters in order to, quote, divest to invest. As you're aware, Selfridge Air National Guard Base is home to A-10s that will be divested by the end of the decade with no replacement mission yet stated. You and I have spoken considerably about this issue, and will continue to do that in the future. But my question is a little broader about procurement and actually having aircraft that will be stationed in various places and certainly related to modernization. So I have a specific question is how is the Air Force actually budgeting for the procurement of aircraft across the service necessary to ensure the full recapitalization of the Air National Guard fighter fleet? And what support specifically do you need from Congress in order to accomplish that procurement budgeting that you're working on?
Thanks, Senator Peters. I was in the Pentagon for the first Gulf War, and what we had at the time was a legacy force essentially left over from the Cold War. So the numbers were quite a bit higher than they ultimately came down to be. The way we're budgeting is to try to balance the near, mid, and long-term capabilities of the Air Force. And what we look at is total combat capability. And what we're trying to get to is the next generation of capabilities as quickly as we can while we sustain the current force, which is adequate to meet our needs. The A-10 in particular is an aircraft that it's over 40 years old now. It was a fantastic aircraft in its day, but it's aging out, and we're going to have to replace it. And we're working with you and the other communities to try to do that in a way which has a minimal impact and preserve some of our capabilities. You mentioned the Guard. I've had an opportunity now to visit a lot of Guard units, including yours in Michigan. They're highly capable units, and they're very important and cost-effective part of the force. So we want to sustain the right balance between active Guard and reserve and have the right mix of mission capabilities. That mix is changing over time, and as war becomes more about information dominance than it does necessarily about kinetic power, we need things like ISR and intelligence and cyber and EW, electronic warfare. So we're trying to move towards that world and get that mix right. So the recapitalization of the fighter fleet, if you will, is one part of a much deeper and richer fabric of things that we're trying to do. We also, of course, have the Space Force, which introduces a whole new set of capabilities as well. And in some cases, space capabilities are going to be taking over for some of the traditionally air capabilities that we've had, areas like communications and surveillance, for example. So that's the picture that we're dealing with. And we're trying to get to the new capabilities that we'll want to field in greater numbers in the future as quickly as we can. That's a priority for us while we sustain a reasonable sized current fleet.